So good morning, everybody. I cannot believe we are at Wednesday, the 13th of July. This month is flying by and the summer flying by even faster. I feel incredibly blessed to share the terrain topics this morning with you with an incredibly valued and honored guest, Linda Elsegood, who is the founder of the Low Dose Naltrexone Research Trust, which was set up in the United Kingdom as a registered charity in 2004. She's also the editor of the amazing book that most of you have your hands on now, which is the LDN book. And after her own personal experience with a diagnosis of MS back in August of 2000, she initiated low-dose naltrexone therapy in December 2003 and has experienced all of the kind of life-changing qualities that it brought to her life, but even better, how she's been able to connect with literally tens of thousands of patients and doctors and pharmacists around the world, sharing of her knowledge, her heart, her soul. And I just feel very excited, Linda, to have you here today. So welcome to our little neck of the woods. Oops, I realized I kept Linda on pause, on mute as well. My apologies. I was like, it got awfully quiet. Go ahead, Linda, you're off mute.
I'm saying thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to it. But maybe you didn't want me to speak.
I'm like, it got awfully quiet. What happened? And I can tell you from having an opportunity to speak with Linda before, she loves to speak. She's got an amazing wealth of knowledge and enthusiasm and has touched so many, especially practitioners. I mean, Linda, that's pretty amazing. I find that a lot of practitioners can really inspire and empower their patients. But to see a patient as yourself turn around and inspire and empower and motivate so many physicians and researchers is an incredible gift. I'd like you to tell us a little bit more of how you got to be in this position, because I know your journey started well before your diagnosis of MS, and then how you have transformed that into this bridge and this connecting and networkship.
Okay. Do you want me to give you a potted history of what my illness has been like? Would you like me to start there? Okay.
I would love that.
I had been, looking back, it was just something that you'd said earlier. I was a very sickly child, and I was born partially deaf. And I was constantly having ear infections and tonsillitis and so on. So I was being given antibiotics after antibiotics after antibiotics. And at the age of 7, I had an operation on my ears. And I can remember the consultant saying to me that you could have the operation only twice. If it didn't work the first time, we could do it again the second time. If not, I'd have to wear a black box around my neck. And he showed me, and I was absolutely horrified that, I didn't want to go through my life with this black box. But I don't know exactly what it was, but it was something to enable you to hear. Anyway, I had the operation, and that worked absolutely fine. I was fine until I was 13, still having tonsillitis, by the way, and they didn't take my tonsils out. They took my adenoids but left my tonsils. At 13, I had glandular fever, which you call Epstein-Barr virus. Yep. I was very, very ill. I had 2 terms off school, so that's like 2/3 of a year.
Wow.
I was so sick. I was vomiting blood. I couldn't move. I had to have the curtains drawn. I can remember the doctor coming out, giving me blood tests and injections, and I hated needles, and I didn't care. That's how sick I felt.
Wow.
When I was able to get out of bed, I was very wobbly, shaky. My mum, who was 4'9", had to, and I was taller than my mum. I was like 5'6" at 13, and she used to partially drag me to the car to take me anywhere. It was awful. and it was very embarrassing because I had swollen glands under my arms, in between my legs, and of course the doctor was feeling these glands, and it was so embarrassing. I wanted to do anything other than that. And it took a while for me to get back to where I was, still having lots of antibiotics. I was actually 21 when I had my tonsils out, and the ENT specialist said, goodness, they're so perforated. Your tonsils are like a tea bag full of bacteria, and you're making yourself ill. So we had the tonsils out. I seemed to be fine. I was always quite tired, but it wasn't until Christmas 1999 my mother had a major heart attack. She nearly died, and I sat with her for 48 hours thinking if I went to sleep she would die, so I had to keep awake to stop her from dying. There was a logic there somewhere, but I'd made myself really tired, and I was working. I had to go back to work, and I had my parents, because my father was in a wheelchair, come to live with me, and luckily I had a friend who was a nurse, and she came to stay as well. And somehow or another we managed for me to go to work, and my mum and dad were being looked after. But then I was just so unbelievably tired, so tired I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd sit down and fall asleep. I could drag myself to work, but that was all I could do. I then had double vision, which actually stopped me from driving. But before then, if I just go back a bit, I was saying to my husband, I had gastroenteritis, I had flu, I had numbness in different parts of my body. And I said to my husband, if I can go away, this was the Easter after the Christmas, all this happened, if we could just go away and I have a complete break from being ill, I can come back and carry on with life and I'll be fine. And he wasn't able to take time off, so I went with my youngest daughter. We went to Portugal, and it was supposed to be warm at Easter, and it was very cold, and it was windy and rainy. And I can remember phoning home and saying to my husband, it's so strange, the wind here and the rain is hitting my face, and it's making my face go really numb. And that was a bit naive. Anyway, I came home and saw the doctor who made me an appointment to see a neurologist. He thought there was more to it. So I was diagnosed with relapsing and remitting MS, and I was given Rebif, which I took for 8 months. And I have never felt so sick and so ill in all my life. And then I had what I thought was a heart attack. I was having such bad chest pains. And Serono on their website actually had these chest pains as a side effect, but they didn't on the English one. Probably they didn't want people to know. But the paramedics came out and said that it was some muscle that had gone into spasm near the heart, and it mimics a heart attack, but it wasn't a heart attack. And I said, oh, that's fine. Well, thank you very much. If it happens again, I'll know, what it is. And they said, well, no, because next time it might be a heart attack, so you would have to call us. So things, I was seeing everybody at the hospital. I was having problems. I was seeing a urologist. I was seeing a gynecologist. I was seeing a gastroenterologist. There was just about everything going wrong with me. And the gastroenterologist said to me, why are you taking this drug? Your liver function tests are in the red. I said, well, my neurologist said that they'll settle down. And she said, no, it will be doing irreversible damage. You should be stopping it. I will speak to him. Well, they were discussing it, and I was thinking, nobody's getting back to me, so it's time for me to take ownership of this, and I'm stopping taking it. So I let him know, I'm not taking it anymore. And I did start to feel a little bit better, actually, once I'd stopped taking it. But the MS was progressing. Even on the Rebif, I was having 3 relapses a year. And I was going further downhill, and you would drop, if it was a ladder, you would drop like 3 rungs when you had a relapse, and I'd probably come back by 1, and by the time I got back up 1 rung, I'd drop another 3. So I was just going further and further downhill. So by October 2003, the left-hand side of my body was numb with pins and needles. Cognitively, it was as though English was my second language. I couldn't recall vocabulary. I couldn't remember anything. I spoke as though I'd had a stroke. I was slurring my words. I was choking on my food. I had double vision. I had lost the hearing in my left ear completely. And if you drew a line down my body, half my nose, half my lips, my tongue, cheek, right the way down, the left-hand side was numb with pins and needles. But numb with pins and needles in such a way similar to when you've been to the dentist and when you start to get the feeling back, but it was like 100 times worse. It was so painful. And then I had twitching muscles, restless legs, burning limbs, which was very, very painful. I also lost my bowel and bladder control. I had no control over that at all. I had previously, when they were trying to diagnose me, I had seen a urologist who inserted a camera and said that there were women who used to have repeated UTIs and it was normal for me. So when they were trying to diagnose me, I was asked, do you have any problems with your bladder? And I said no. And then they said to me, after I eventually said, this was weeks later, that I had, probably 3 UTIs a month. And they said, well, how can you call that normal? And I said, well, I was told that was normal for me,
Oh, wow.
I felt rather silly at that point. So, and pains in my head. I had an awful lot of pain in my head. And I was furniture walking. I had very bad vertigo and no balance. And the strength in my left leg just used to go. It was like flicking a switch and it would go and I would fall. So with the lack of balance and the leg strength and the vertigo, I spent a lot of time on the floor because the world would come up around me and I'd lay on the floor. And I can remember I was going to answer the door holding on, and I had to lay on the floor. I just went down and my husband came and opened the door, and these friends came in and he just stepped over me because that's what he had to do, because I had to lay there until everything stopped spinning before I could get up. So he was leading these friends who, were horrified that he was stepping over me on the floor and just leaving me there. And he was saying, oh, she's all right. Just leave her. She'll be fine. And they were just like, seriously, you have to leave her on the floor. But that's how it was so common that it wasn't a big deal, because that is what I did. So I went to see my neurologist, and he did all the different tests on me. And he sat me down at his desk, and he sat down and he held his hand out, shook hands with me and said, I'm really sorry to tell you you're secondary progressive now and there's nothing more we can do. He got up and opened the door and showed me out. So at that point I felt, I said to my husband, he may as well have said, go home and die quietly and don't make a fuss, you're an embarrassment. That is how I felt. And I was just feeling so ill. So I'm not a defeatist, but I actually thought at that time I was in so much pain, and my doctor had come out to see me, and I'd said to him, how, do you think I'm going to get any better? And he said, I think if you were going to, you would have done by now. And he'd bought me some strong painkillers, I can't remember what they were, and fetched me some water. I was home on my own. And after he'd gone, I was thinking, I can't live like this anymore. It's degrading, it's demoralizing, and every time I opened my mouth to say something, it came out wrong. People were looking at me, they were sorry, and I had the problems with the bowel and the bladder, and it was just awful. And the days were just passing me by without me achieving anything or doing anything. It was like watching one of those calendars flick, the first, the second, the third. But what had I done? Nothing. I just stayed in bed and failed at everything that I tried to do. Even to try and get to the toilet, it was impossible. And the pain and people, family and friends looking at me, the pity, the feeling sorry for you and not knowing what to say or what to do to help. And there was nothing really they could say or do. So I was thinking, if I were to take the pills and end it all, as horrifying and shocked everybody would be, they would be able to get on with their lives rather than me being a burden, if you like. And then I thought, who would be the person to find me? And it would be my 15-year-old daughter. And I thought, no, I can't do that to her. I can't ruin her life. So the only way was to fight it. I'd got to prove everybody wrong, and that isn't how I was going to be, and I was going to get better. All I could manage was 10 minutes at a time at a computer after I fell and stumbled and got there and sat down trying to see with one eye. I had a patch, so I looked a bit like a pirate. But after 10 minutes mentally, I couldn't read anymore, and sometimes it's very difficult to take in any information anyway. But I found, I knew I wasn't unique, that there were other people out there with MS, and what were these people doing? What treatments were they taking? And I found people, and they were actually in America, who were taking LDN, and everybody said the same. If it doesn't do you any good, it's not going to do you any harm. My doctor had retired, and I had a nice young lady doctor who seemed at the time about the age of my eldest daughter, and she was lovely. And she said to me, she read all the information, and she said, if it was me, I would certainly try it. She had a word with the practice, the doctors in the practice, and they wouldn't allow her to prescribe it. She said, but if you can get a prescription for LDN, I'll be happy to monitor you. So that's what we did. So that was the start of my journey, and I was told that you could have introductory side effects, you could have sleep disturbance, you could have problems with your bowels, you could have worsening of pre-existing symptoms. And I wanted those side effects. I wanted to know it was doing something for me, and I had nothing. And I know. I was desperate to know it was working.
It was working. Yeah. We get that thing.
I could have been taking an aspirin, but it did nothing at all. And then after 3 weeks, it was amazing, and it still makes me smile. Living inside my head was like a television set that wasn't tuned in. Couldn't see properly, couldn't think properly, couldn't hear properly. Everything was scrambled. And after 3 weeks, one day I woke up, and sometimes when I used to wake up in the mornings, for a split second, I could wake up and think I felt okay. And then after 2 or 3 seconds, I'd feel everything again. But sometimes for a split second, I wouldn't feel all these awful things. And I woke up this day, and I could think. And that's very hard to explain to somebody, but I could actually think. And I sat up, and I could see better, and I could hear properly. And it was like, it's like this television set had been tuned in. And that was just after 3 weeks. It was amazing. There are people who say they notice things, they've slept better than they have for years after the first night. Well, that certainly didn't happen with me. But, and most doctors will say it can take 4 months before their patients notice anything. And I think I would have been very impatient if I'd had to wait 4 months. But 3 weeks was amazing. And that was the start of getting my life back. But because it had taken such a long while to go down to the place that I was at, you can't expect to go back to where you were quickly. And it took me a good 18 months. And 18 months of working at it. I didn't just sit and do nothing. I had to try and walk again because I was using a wheelchair. And how people can get out of a wheelchair and just walk when their muscles have wasted. I don't know. And my tendons had shrunk, and I had pains in the arch of my foot because the tendons had shortened, and I had to do exercises, and it was persevering.
Start the whole body. Yeah.
Yeah. I could walk like one car's length and then walk back.
A quick side for folks.
I'm sorry, I lost you.
Wow. And just a quick side note for those who are listening in. No, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Linda?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm making sure. One little side note I want to interject for those who are just tuning in and maybe just hearing this incredibly powerful and compelling story of going into the deepest, darkest places and starting to literally learn to live again and walk again. I just want to give a tiny little background. Naltrexone, low-dose naltrexone that we're talking about today, it belongs to a class of drugs known as opiate antagonists, okay? And we started theorizing the impact of opiate antagonists in the 1940s, and we started using it for kind of like drug overdose, like opiate overdose in the 60s and beyond, in high doses, like 40 to 100 milligrams or even higher for folks who'd overdosed on opiates. So I always use the example when I talk to patients, for any of them who've seen the movie Pulp Fiction. There's a character, Uma Thurman and John Travolta play a character role where she ODs basically on an opiate, and he stabs something into her chest in a needle, which is Narcan. And I'll tell you, after working in a drug and alcohol addiction center, I got to see that happen in life 3 times, and I watched the amazing response of the body coming back from the dead, if you will, with a high dose use of naltrexone to reverse the opiate toxicity. And so it's kind of interesting where Linda's talking about her story using a very low dose of this medicine. It kind of has the same sort of impact as the Pulp Fiction movie of kind of resurrecting you from the dead or the dying. I think that's a really compelling story. Can you kind of fast forward a bit to what you learned, how you got to understand, like a little bit of the history with Dr. Bahari and his work with HIV/AIDS patients in New York City in the 80s. That's how you started hearing about this in the U.S. eventually in the 90s and 2000s. But do you want to give a little background as to how we even came to know this medicine as an immunomodulator?
As you were saying, and Dr. Ian Zagon and Dr. Patricia McLaughlin had been doing tests in the laboratories on naltrexone in the 1970s. So we had trials of naltrexone that showed that it was only harmful to the liver in doses of 300 milligrams a day. As you were saying, for addiction, they were using 50 milligram tablets and often 3 times a day. So they were taking 150 a day, which was only half of the amount that you needed to take for it to be harmful. So low-dose naltrexone is normally 3 to 4.5 milligrams. Sometimes people go higher or lower, but you can see that it's not going to be harmful. And as you were saying, Dr. Bahari was using it for HIV patients with great success, I may add. And his widow, Jackie Young, she is our patron. So if people are interested, on our Vimeo channel, there is a really nice interview with Jackie, and she explains all Dr. Bahari's work and all the way through all the different trials and tribulations that he had along the way. But very briefly, he had been using it very successfully, and a friend of his had multiple sclerosis, his friend's daughter, I should say. So he thought that LDN helped to regulate a dysfunctional immune system, and he thought that it would help with MS. So this lady took LDN for her MS, and she had a remarkable story similar to my own. And this lady thought, well, why am I taking it? I'm sure I have been misdiagnosed. I don't have MS. I'm absolutely fine. so she stopped taking it. And from her experience, I would never stop taking LDN. She had a really bad relapse, and certainly found out she actually did have MS. And I do believe that she went back on it and didn't stop taking it either. But Dr. Bahari had used it for cancer, Alzheimer's, Crohn's, and there was all of this legacy. Unfortunately, Dr. Bahari had fallen and had an accident, so he was unable to attend the first LDN conference. I was very disappointed. It was held in New York in 2005, so we didn't get to meet, which was very sad, and unfortunately he's since died. But the work that he has done, and the work that Dr. Zagon and all his colleagues have done, has led to all these other remarkable doctors that have come along that have done trials and studies. For example, Dr. Jill Smith, she's done some studies for Crohn's and pediatric Crohn's. Jared Younger for his fibromyalgia. Small ones like Dr. Pradeep Chopra, he's shown that what it does for regional pain syndrome. Dr. Leonard Weinstock for restless leg syndrome. There are so many people who are doing small to big trials and studies, and we're learning more all the time, and it's just amazing. I have interviewed over 500 people myself, doctors, researchers, pharmacists, patients, and it is always so heartwarming to hear people's stories and experience. People from unusual things like Hailey-Hailey's disease, which is an awful skin disease. Let's think alopecia, psoriasis, so many different skin conditions where, it's autoimmune. And if any condition has an autoimmune component, LDN certainly has a chance of working for those people. But there are, the pain aspects of it. There are the GI problems, and as I was saying about the restless legs, and it just encompasses. I think we now have 204 conditions that we know of that people are using LDN for with good success.
Wow,
amazing!
I didn't realize it had gone up to that number. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because an interesting side note. A lot of my clients are aware of this concept, but one of the things that low-dose naltrexone does is it's as an opiate antagonist, as a reversal of sort of exogenous opiate overdose. It also blocks the physiologic activity of exogenous opiates and endogenous opiates when timed properly. And what it does is it has an impact on very specifically catecholamines and certain peptides and neurotransmitters. So in my patient population, a lot of them have COMT SNPs. These are catecholamine epigenetic polymorphisms. And a lot of folks have seen and read studies about the use of things like beta blockers to treat, ovarian cancer, for instance. And yet the mechanism of action of low-dose naltrexone having an impact on COMT SNP malformations is far safer, far more effective, with a lot of other positive side effects and none of the negative side effects you get with some of the conventional pharmaceuticals that we're trying to use in a similar fashion that has a far more wielding, dangerous, toxic profile. So I just think that was a really important thing to bring on board here, that it really does have an impact on stress response and stress chemistry in the body and neurological response and chemistry in the body. So I think it's super exciting of the research going on with this for things like autism, Alzheimer's, dementia, ALS, beyond MS. My first experience with low-dose naltrexone was working when I was in medical school. I worked in an HIV clinic for 3 years. We used this a lot thanks to Dr. Bahari's work. And I got to witness this in the mid-90s and watch it reverse Kaposi sarcomas, reverse crazy lung infections and mycoplasmic infections, actually change the CD4, CD8, T cell count. I mean, I watched miracles with HIV patients on a regular basis. And then later, I worked in a pain hospital. And there was a very innovative young doctor who used this in his pain patients, which seems ironic given that most pain patients are put on opiates, right? Which in the cancer world we know suppresses the immune system and proliferates cancer cells. So I've learned a lot in realms that had nothing to do with cancer. And then in private practice for years, I used it with all of my autoimmune patients, a lot of MS, rheumatoid arthritis. And so it's only been for me in the last few years I started using it with oncology, and it's gone even above and beyond that, Linda. And what you have done with these conferences and this book and your foundation and all these resources you've pulled together is to help us understand so many different applications for this amazing medicine.
And I also didn't mention thyroid conditions as well. Hashimoto's and Sjogren's syndrome. Yes, all the different. But I would say if anybody wanted to take LDN and they were on thyroid medication, to watch the levels of the medication, because normally people have to decrease it as they
love it.
Yeah, take, which is really good, because there are people who have been taking maybe 14 different medications a day, and they can over time just get down to taking LDN alone, or just 2 or 3 rather than like 14. So that's amazing, because the more medication you're putting in your system, the higher the risk of getting the side effects, isn't it? It becomes like a pyramid of all the different cocktails.
The quicker you get, it's ironic. Totally. So can you off the top of your head, I know what the literature says and the book says, but what is your personal understanding as a layperson, not a clinician, of the main mechanisms of action that low-dose naltrexone offers? I mean, I can spew those out from what the medical clinical community says, but from what you've seen and heard, Linda, what's your perspective on what it's doing in the body?
Okay, well, until a while back, we were told that it helped boost the body's own endorphins. It made your body produce more endorphins, as you were saying about it being an opiate blocker, and it stops the receptors, etc., etc. So the LDN, when it boosts the endorphins, obviously is the body's own natural feel-good factor and painkiller. So we could understand that, exercising and chocolate, helps raise your endorphins. So it's going to make you feel better. And then it came along where it affected the toll-like receptors. So that was actually helping to fight, inflammation and so on. So I would say that it is using the words, I think Ian Zagon said it, that it helps regulate a dysfunctional immune system. So, but taking that, I would say if your body was a car and it had 4 cylinders, it was only firing on 2, it wouldn't be running properly. And LDN helps it to run on all 4 cylinders again. That is how I usually think of it, that it is helping your body work correctly.
Beautiful. I love that, because, we can go into the whole, that it works, to block opiate receptors and does the endorphin release and all the different specifics of CD8, CD4 cells. And we can get very heady, but I think that's why I really wanted to hear from you. And I love your analogy of the car, because it's really that simple, of you were given some tools to help the other cylinders come back on board and start working again.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Great. And I think from what I've seen on your resource page and what your documentary, which we'll be posting information on the book and a lot of the other pieces that you've brought to fruition to for us to all access, from clinicians to patients. We're just getting started, really, on a lot of the research and a lot of the potential of this medication.
And it's educating doctors, and this is why I really enjoy interviewing different doctors and researchers, because we have so many doctors that will contact us and say, I've listened to Dr. So-and-so, can you give me their details? Can you put me in touch with other doctors that are doing X, Y, Z? And I absolutely love it when I'm introducing different people. And we have Jill Brooke, who's now a researcher, and she's joined our team. And Dr. Leonard Weinstock is also one of our doctors, and they're going to be working on POTS, which
Wow.
is an awful thing as well. So they're going to be doing some studies together to work out how they're going to go ahead and do it. But also, Jared Younger is going to work with us to put together, he actually has put the trial proposal together for an MS trial, which is, really exciting. The first, and MS is a tricky one. It's not as easy as, say, Crohn's disease, because there are different anomalies where they could say, it could have been relapsing and remitting. It might have, taken that path anyway. So it's quite tricky, and to get MRI scans and things, it's not going to be cheap. But that is a real big goal of mine, is to get LDN into clinical trials for MS. But and introducing these doctors to work together, regardless of where they are in the world, is certainly a way forward. And these doctors also listen to the interviews that patients have to say, how their experience has been, which is, there is no studies and trials for all these different conditions, and all we have to go on is anecdotal evidence, really. And sharing experiences has to be the way forward. There has to be the trials and the studies, but it's getting the doctors that are using it, who have become very passionate about it, who want to help take it further. That is the answer, because it's not going to be trialed by big drug companies, which drugs normally are in trials due to the drug companies. They're normally drug company driven. So this is something different, because it is off-label, and it can be prescribed by any doctor on a named patient basis. But to get it out there readily available, it's got to be in the trials.
I love it. And, one thing I wanted to go back to before I move into the next question was, I think there is such an interesting correlation of you having the Epstein-Barr virus, the, glandular disease, mono, as also it's known, and later for you, the sequela of that, which became chronic fatigue syndrome. I mean, you were in such dire straits there, that the impact or the implications of this on the antiviral. So then later on, Dr. Bahari's work with the HIV virus community, and I've been hearing some very interesting empirical data, if you will, on people using this in the Lyme's community, which is a huge epidemic in this country as well. So I just think that it's, again, your life experience, it's like you're like a drop on the timeline of this, and you've lived through several sort of manifestations of it, from kind of, like you said, being a little bit of a sickly, not well-functioning immune system child, to moving into something that kicked up extreme stress in your chemistry, which led to this illness of the Epstein-Barr and the chronic fatigue, and then moving deeper, into the MS symptoms later. You can just even watch your trajectory as an interesting map of how your immune system kept falling apart. And to see where you are now with this many years later, we don't hear many miracle stories of people getting better after going down as far as you did. And that's in all worlds of chronic illness, not just MS, but in cancer and Alzheimer's and other chronic illnesses. So it's just, there's such an offering of hope here. And so with that, I would love for you to tell us all a little bit about the research paper that recently came out about your book, about the documentary, and about the upcoming conference. Maybe just a little blip on this for each, in case people have not learned about all the resources that are available now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have found the date of the next conference, and it's going to be held in Portland in Oregon, September 22nd to the 24th. That's 2017. So it's going to be amazing. As you know, we're hoping that you're going to come and be a speaker there. The conference will be over 3 days, and we will have around about 32 doctors that will be taking part. And we will also then have up to 36 hours of pre-recorded PowerPoint presentations from these doctors that people can watch at their leisure, which will be absolutely amazing, because the doctors need more time than we can give them in 3 days, and we want to cover as many conditions as possible. So pre-recording the biggest chunk of the conference is going to be amazing. It just is, and everybody is going to be able to say everything that they're doing and experiencing, etc., etc. Now, the book called the LDN book, I was asked for many years by a Dr. Mark Schuckman, who's a psychiatrist, and he kept saying, "You should write a book, Linda. You should write a book." I am so busy. Every spare minute I give to helping other people. I don't get paid, and I started a charity, and I set it up in such a way that nobody would ever get paid. Everybody would have to be a volunteer, because I wanted people. We don't receive any funding from anywhere. Everything is done with donations, so that if people wanted to give us, say, $10, we could say, hand on heart, we're not taking $5 of that for salaries. The whole $10 is going to the cause. That is why I set it up in that way. But having done that, it means many people aren't in the position to be able to give it the number of hours it needs, because they need to earn money to live, obviously. But anyway, the book, I kept saying, no, I didn't have time to write a book. I've never written a book. I wouldn't know how to go about writing a book. So for years, this went on. And then last year, I think it was about April time, Margot Baldwin from Chelsea Green Publishing contacted me and said about, I think you ought to write a book. And she was very persuasive. And I'd spoken to her and asked all these questions, and I put the phone down, and I'd agreed to write this book. And so I was then sort of, I'm a list person, and it was like I sort of panic. Oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And I thought, well, just calm down. Here's a piece of paper. Write down, I needed like 15 chapters, and say, if it was me and I wanted to know about LDN, what would I want written down? Make it like an LDN Bible kind of thing. So I just wrote down, this chapter, I'd like a chapter on this, a chapter on this. I want to know how it works, why it works, what can the side effects be, and experience of different conditions. So I wrote the titles, and then I had to think, who do I know who would be best person to write this chapter? But then when I'd done all of this, and I ran it past Margot, and she said if I wanted to have the book published for the conference this year in February, everything had got to be presented by June. So I had to contact these doctors and say, would you do it? Oh, yes, I'd be honoured to do it. Okay, you've got 10 weeks or something like this. And
Yeah.
no pressure. And I think I had 16 people involved in the book, and I had so many different deadlines because once naivety is a really great thing, because I didn't know that books have to be edited 3 times, then they have to be proofread, and then it has to be going through things with the printers. These doctors did not let me down. Not one doctor missed one deadline. And the book was actually printed 3 weeks early. I was so impressed. I can't thank all these doctors and researchers and pharmacists for all the help and support they give me. And when they come to the conference, they don't get paid. They don't have their expenses paid. They come to help. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that I have had. I would never have met these people and the wonderful people who take LDN and share their stories. They're people that I would never have met otherwise. I have friends all around the world, and I call them friends. They are friends, and I have been very, very lucky. So we've got the book. That is my vision of what an LDN Bible should be. So for anybody who wants to know about LDN, get a copy of the book. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it answers the basic questions. It goes in depth for doctors as well, but as a lay person, there's still enough information there to understand about LDN.
Yeah.
And the conference
we'll be putting a link on that too, and we'll put a link to the conference and to the book for sure.
And we've got past conferences that people can watch as well, 2013, 2014 and 2016, and there are the PowerPoints there as well, which are also interesting to watch. The 2014 and 2016 have credits for NDs as well, so that is something if doctors want educational credits for. But it's all coming together very nicely, and it's moving ahead quite quickly, but it has taken a long time to get to where we are. I started the LDN Research Trust in 2004, and it was very difficult initially, but there are more and more doctors coming on board all the time who are very interested. And as Dr. Phil Boyle said, one doctor asked him, but is LDN addictive? I said, it certainly is. I just can't wait for the next person to come in that I can prescribe it for. He said, it's not addictive for the patient, but it's addictive for me because I have seen such wonderful results. Yeah, I thought that was a really good answer.
So I love it. And I've actually heard many people quote, naturopaths and MDs quote, saying, I have never seen more health come from a medicine, from any other medicine than has come from low-dose naltrexone. That says something. And I know you're going to have a load of questions here, Linda, so I'd love to open that up, but I do want to point out to everybody, I'm going to have links to Linda's website. I'm going to have links to her Vimeo, like online videos and past conferences, links to the book, links to the documentary, and I believe you've got a link set up now for the coming 2017 conference. Linda, is that open to the general public as well as to physicians, or is it just physicians only?
No, it's physicians and the general public. And the good thing is it's live streamed. So if you can't get to Portland, we'd love to see people there, but they can watch it online. Obviously, it's local time for Oregon. And while the conference is happening, you can actually submit questions to the panels. We have 5 panels during the time, and I think it takes up around about 5 hours because we have so many questions. And the feedback from the doctors last year was, absolutely fantastic. People asked questions that I wanted to know. People asked questions I would have thought of if I'd thought of them, and if the panel didn't know the answers, they would all say, no, I don't know this one. No. This doctor said, so I knew that all the questions that were answered were truthful answers, because nobody was embarrassed to say, I didn't know the answer. Nobody answered a question for the sake of answering it. They were truthful answers. So people can watch the live stream, and if they register for the conference, they can actually submit questions from 2 weeks prior to the conference to give to the panel, or they can do it on the day. And there's also a live chat while the conference is going on, and people really enjoy that, talking to other attendees, So if you're at home, it's not like sitting on your own. You can still take part, which is good fun.
I love that. And there is also a very beautifully written article by Dr. Emily Kane, who's a colleague of mine, a naturopathic doctor, who wrote an article that we'll also link, which is basically a recap of this year's 5th annual low-dose Naltrexone conference. It's a great review and gives a lot of the details of where it's come from and where it's going. So we'll link that as well. Linda, is there anything else you want to say before I open this up to the floodgates of questions?
Well, I haven't mentioned that there has been a new cancer paper published, which I'm sorry I forgot. And the results have been absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. They have found Dr. Wei Liu and Professor Angus Dalgleish, where they can isolate the cancer cells, turn the cells off, and then kill them. So that is something that is going to be a big deal, is underestimating the impact that that's going to have. And that should now open up ways of doing clinical trials, which will be amazing. And that will be the proof that's needed. The studies that they did were laboratory-based, so now we need to actually move that into clinical trials.
Beautiful, beautiful. And, being the era of personalized medicine and moving into the immunotherapies, interest that's kind of sweeping at least the United States, but I think beyond, the timing of this is really ripe. So it's amazing. And Linda, before I open up to questions, I'm in awe of you and your spirit. I've said this a million times to my own clients, but I've been doing this for 25 years, and I feel like barely made any headway with changing medicine. It's always my clients. It's always you guys. It's always the patients that make this change happen. And I think you are such a model of that, of inspiration, and to impress upon others that are listening in to take, this is your path. You were clearly doing what you came to this world to do, Linda. So thank you so much for your time and energy. And with that, I'd love to open this up for any questions. I know if a bunch of you take this medication, and a bunch of you are interested in taking this medication. So let's hear from you. Leora, you're on.
Hi, Nasha and Linda. This is Leora. Thank you so much for the incredible call so far. I've really appreciated it. I have two questions, but they're very, very related. So I hope I won't get in trouble for asking two. But with the recent movie, The Game Changer, there was talk of pulsed dosing for cancer. Can you just clarify, Linda, what you mean by pulsed dosing, or what oncologists mean by pulsed dosing? Is the recommendation still kind of that once-a-day dose, or is there value in stopping and restarting or retitrating up again? And then second to that question is dose for cancer. I've seen on a lot of the online forums that Dr. Деген has sometimes recommended that 3 milligrams is more of the ideal cancer dose, meaning less is more. But I don't know how valid that is, so I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Okay. On the the press release that we had for the day the paper was printed or published, which was also the day we released the cancer documentary, the lady that we had working with us, Christine Fieldhouse, she'd interviewed. I'm just trying to open it up here. She'd interviewed Dr. Wei Liu, and the press release is somewhere on our website. I'll have to find it for you. But he said, there was a quote, the pulse dosing anyway was 2 days on and 2 days off, which was something we hadn't heard of before. And they were also using high doses of vitamin D in the study, and it was doses of 4.5. He said, however, including a stop signal isn't enough. Rather than just stopping the cancer cells from growing, patients understandably want to get rid of them, and we've found by giving LDN for 2 days and then withdrawing it, that can bring about cell death as well. So he was doing the pulse dosing of 2 days on, 2 days off. I'd never heard of that before until he'd done this this paper. But he found with doing the pulse dosing, they were able to actually kill the cancer cells.
And you said that was with the 4.5 milligrams?
Yes.
Okay. That's very interesting.
Cell line study, so I want to be mindful of that as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. And then is Avicel an okay filler, or do you think lactose is better?
We have learned that the filler of choice is Avicel. That seems to be the favorite filler.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Great question. Excellent. Thank you. And Carmela, we'll hear from you.
Hi, Nasha. It's Carmela. Could you repeat the last filler? I couldn't understand it.
Avicel.
That's the Avicel. That's the microlysed cellulose, correct?
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. My question, thank you so much, Linda. My question has to do with Terry Wall's work on nutrition and how much she seems to have credited her diet to her helping her MS. Did that play a role in any of your self-treatment?
Great question.
I think it's very important to watch what you eat, whether you have an autoimmune condition or not. If you're going to live on junk food and there is no value in what you're putting in your mouth, it's going to make you sick eventually, I think, regardless of what you have. And it's very important when you do have an autoimmune disease to look at everything, lifestyle, diet, exercise. I'm sure Nasha agrees with all of that. And I am now totally gluten-free, dairy-free and added sugar-free as far as I possibly can be. Do I feel different? I used to get a lot of acid reflux, which I don't get anymore. And interestingly, I was diagnosed after I'd had 3 courses of intravenous steroids, and I had gained 6 stone 6 times. Oh, it's horrifying. 14, whatever that is. It was an awful lot. It was nearly, I was saying to my husband, I'm more or less buy one, get one free. You know, I'd gained so much weight. And I then became a type 2 diabetic because I'd had 18 months in bed. Bad news. And I was then started on metformin. I'm just trying to explain the diet bit here. So before I started altering my diet seriously, I was taking the metformin every day, being dairy-free, gluten-free and added sugar-free. When I went for a checkup only a year ago, they said to me, your sugar levels now, because they do a blood test to find out over the last 3 months what your average is. You are pre-diabetic levels. So it's like, okay. So then 6 months after that, which was only a couple of months ago, they said we've redone the blood tests, and now you show you are no longer a diabetic. We have never seen this before. There are some people who have gastric bands who sometimes go back under the diabetic level. I've been diabetic for quite a few years now, like 12 years or something like that, 10 years, a long time to suddenly now be told you're not a diabetic anymore. So I actually had a blood test last week, which they're going to just double check to make sure that, because they've taken me off the metformin and everything, that I don't need it anymore. So that will be really interesting. So if by changing your diet, being very, very careful, I still bake cakes, but I use gluten-free flour. I use coconut sugar rather than, refined sugar. I don't eat many, but I haven't gone without anything. And if that means that I have reversed my diabetes, I think that's amazing.
You go, girl. That's fantastic and great question. And it's such a key player. And, in my world, I do both the low glycemic diet and the low dose naltrexone with folks with, cancer, but also the gluten-free, 100% gluten-free with both cancer and autoimmune. And it's really benefited well. So your story is, again, very compelling. And I love it when you surprise your doctors with the outcome. So I'm going to do you have a few extra minutes to go over a few minutes to take 2 more questions?
Yes, I do.
Perfect. Let's hear from Gail.
Hi, Nasha. It's Gail.
Good morning.
Hello.
You're on. Hi, you got it. You're there.
I just wanted to tell Linda that this has been so great. My question is, I have my son had a stroke-like event when he was 31 that disabled his left arm and leg, and he suffers from dystonia in his left arm. Would this be something that might be helpful?
Wow.
Well, not that I would know of, unless there was an autoimmune component in his condition. What would you think, Nasha?
Knowing Gail's family history, I think that's likely. And right. I think that it's, like you said before, it doesn't cause harm. It's worth a try. And it does seem to have some great impact on neurological.
Yeah.
Yes. There are so many doctors who say exactly that. I haven't heard of it helping with X, Y, Z. But you know what? Give it a try because it won't do any harm.
That's right. I will. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Oh, keep us posted on that, Gail.
I will.
Great. Good. Thank you. Great. And Renee. Kristen. Sorry, I'm looking. I do that every time. All right. There you go. Now you're up.
Good morning.
Hi.
Thank you so much. My question is, in the beginning, early on in your story, you talked about how the doctor who was going to monitor you couldn't give you the prescription because of the doctor she was working with. How did you go about getting your prescription?
I had a private prescription from a doctor, and I had to pay for it myself, but it was like £30 a month, which is dollars more. Pounds to dollars. I can't remember the exchange rate now.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, now it's in America. It's like $1 a day, so it's not an expensive drug to pay for yourself.
Yeah, a couple of my doctors are like, no, can't get it. We don't prescribe it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious.
I would say we do have lists of doctors who are LDN prescribers. Some of them want to be listed on the website. Some of them choose not to. But if you are looking for a doctor and would like to find out who prescribes it in your area, just send me an email and I'll help you find one.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I think that's a really great point you brought up, because actually in the commonly asked questions in the back of Linda's book, that's one of the questions of what do I do if my doctor says I can't prescribe this? And I'll be bold for any of the doctors listening or listening in. That's bullshit. Okay, I'll just say that. They can absolutely prescribe it. It is a completely safe and been used in the drug pharmacopoeia, since the 40s, and it's an absolute. It's that they choose not to. That's a different story altogether. So that I just wanted to qualify for listeners, but I love that creating a larger resource network and more interested physicians really wanting to tout that they use this therapy. I've been very surprised in the last couple of years. I've had only 1 or 2 doctors say no to prescribing it. It's been really a growing interest and willingness. So I'm hopeful. So thank you for that incredible question. And then Pamela, I think we can get you in on a question as well this morning.
I'm sorry, was that me, Pamela?
Yes, it is. You got it.
Great. Circling back to nutrition and diets, how does the keto diet play with LDN? I've been having some problems staying in ketosis taking it. Is this common, or is it not an issue?
Oh, you're talking about very low-calorie diet, is that right?
Low carb.
Low carbohydrate.
Yeah. I think
it could be similar. Actually, it could be that you're getting the one that's in a base of glucose, Pamela. After that conversation that Leora brought up, that makes my brain click on that. It might be good for you to look at changing to the microcellulose instead as a base.
I wondered about that. That's great.
Yeah. And Linda, what else would you have to offer that?
Yes, I mean the Avocel filler I do feel is good. Low carbs I think is a good idea. Getting a balance, and I think it's very important to eat food that is as fresh and as natural as you can have it, and to try and eliminate processed foods. I think there are too many additives in processed foods. If we could go back to eating how we used to eat years ago, starting from scratch when you're cooking, I think that is a big deal. If you look on food that's been prepared or tinned or frozen or whatever, and look at the label of what is actually in it, it's quite horrifying what they put in food. And as you probably know, Nasha, gluten seems to get in everything, doesn't it?
Even in your toothpaste.
I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it, where gluten gets through. And I've been told you can't be partially gluten-free. You've got to be totally gluten-free and check absolutely everything. And it takes weeks of going in a supermarket with glasses on, reading all these labels, and you think, this one must be okay. Oh, no, that's got, such and such in it. And it's very, very difficult. But once you know what it is you can and can't eat, it's not so bad. But I really do think sugar is a big deal. Sugar and salt too.
And it's interesting because most of my patients are actually all of my patients are on a low glycemic diet, and there's kind of this realm. Most of them now are on a ketogenic diet or very close to that, and I've not had any issues of people going out of ketosis on low dose naltrexone. So everyone's unique, chemically unique, and there may be other issues for your chemistry, Pamela, but it does make me think, because I did run across some information saying that the lactose-based one can be problematic for diabetics. So that would make sense to me that could be problematic for someone who's very, very sensitive to sugars. And so that might be a strategy to start with. But I've personally found, because of the nature of how ketogenic diet immunomodulates and upregulates mitochondrial function, I think it's an incredible synergy and potentizes the effect of low-dose naltrexone clinically. So I just want to put that into the universe. And Linda, if there's anything else to add to that, I'd love for you to do so.
I would say there are clinics that are using LDN for weight loss, which is very interesting too. Yes.
Huh. Very interesting. Well, fantastic. I think there's one more question we can take this morning.
Thank you, Nathan. Linda, you mentioned something about thyroid medication and LDN dosing. Could you both elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, that's a great
people find who take thyroid medication and LDN, after starting, they have to be very careful and to watch their levels because how it works on the T cells. Normally, people have to reduce their thyroid medications. They don't need as much. Not fully understanding thyroid conditions myself to a great extent, I do know that you can make yourself very ill if your levels drop too quickly. So you have to adjust the thyroid and medication, usually with being monitored by a doctor who will be able to check. I think it's done by blood tests. I'm not quite sure, but usually you have to reduce your thyroid medications after a while of being on LDN.
And I love that point got brought up because, for one of my sort of areas of expertise and practice has been Hashimoto's and autoimmune thyroiditis. And of course, when you have an autoimmune condition, it doesn't matter what the label is on top of it. It seems quite responsive to low-dose naltrexone. And the issue really for Hashimoto's is not a thyroid medication deficiency. It's not, we shouldn't be treating it with thyroid medications. And so I think that it's very interesting that the research is showing when you put low-dose naltrexone with these folks, they quickly, need to come off that medication or be watched carefully for it because it's altering the rest of the picture, the immune process, in a way that the pharmaceuticals never could. And there's actually a couple of, I think I just read an interview with Tom Cowan, whom I know you work with a lot, and he talks about using this with his Hashimoto's patients very successfully. So even though most of my patients have Hashimoto's because I test all of my patients for this, I think that my experience has been that it seems to have just naturally been a lovely immunomodulating side effect of the low-dose naltrexone yet again. So I think that's a good thing if you're working with low-dose naltrexone and you're on thyroid medication to make sure you're having your TSH, total T4, free T3, monitored on a regular basis to make sure you're not over-medicating any longer. So great clarification and follow-up. And holy cow, Linda, I could just talk to you forever. And that's where I'm excited to link a ton of great resources that you offer to the community because they could just get lost down the rabbit hole for days and weeks into all of the information you've drawn together for all of us to keep exploring. And I just am so appreciative of your time this morning for us and this evening for you. And we will be in touch, I am sure, over years to come. Everybody keep your eyes out for all the amazing work Linda continues to bring to the world of healing. Thank you very much.
And we're having a new website, which is going to be easier to navigate. So that's coming soon.
Yay! So keep checking back, everybody. And FYI to all of you, including Linda, we will be getting all the links and all this posted hopefully this evening or tomorrow morning. And we'll get that off to you as well, Linda. And I'm off to another class to teach next. And thanks for your patience this morning with some of our technical difficulties. It worked out perfectly. So all the best. And Linda, sending you lots of love over the pond. Take good care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.